Everyone should be ad hominem is an indication you've already lost the argument. And
Same
straw
with
man
straw
is
man. If you start off with a version of so or if, that's usually a tell that your argument's not good. So,
well,
I
I don't.
apply this to my own argument. If I find myself, I'll read the argument and be like, that has all the flaws of a bad argument in it. I better go back and re-examine.
Scott Adams Luth, I think, is a good book to read. But let me just bring this one up. This is from, speaking of Canada, speaking of madness. It's absurd. Debate over canceled performance by Russian piano prodigy in Montreal. When it canceled a young Russian's piano performance this week, the Montreal Symphony Orchestra was reacting to a wave of protest from the Ukrainian community. First of all, I'll actually call bullcrap on that statement. I don't believe the Ukrainian community in Montreal ever called for the cancellation of a Russian pianist in Montreal. I don't believe it.
The only caveat to that is the influential Ukrainian organizations in the West, dating back to the late 19th century, one of their lead publication was actually prohibited in Canada in 1944 because of how openly and overtly pro-Nazi it was. So some of what you could call not your ordinary Ukrainian is going to be doing that sort of thing, but some of your Ukrainian lobby has some they've created this mythology of the Homodor, that it was just targeting Ukrainians, that it had nothing to do with the the Cossacks, who were the real target of it, and all the famine that happened around the rest in the Caucasus. It was worse in Kazakhstan than it was in eastern Ukraine, and the target in eastern Ukraine was the Cossacks. And that's because old dear Stalin knew that the Cossacks had a fierce streak of independence, as can be read in their great letter to the Sultan of the Turkish Sultan back in the 16th, 17th century that later was celebrated in art. But it's a disturbing thing, and you're seeing it. People feel totally comfortable. I mean, the idiot governor, the Sununu, Sununu, just like his dad, he's got a part of his brain that's just not functioning. Taking off Russian vodka to make a point, without even knowing whether it has anything to do with the Russian government whatsoever. All these ban on, we're not going to have Russian vodka. We're not going to have. I guess we're going to ban caviar now. No more beluga caviar. That will teach them. This punishment of people. I still think sanctions violate a lot of international law because they're issued by countries that do not have a self-defense argument in favor of those sanctions, and often they are meant and intended. As you see people bragging about, they're going to make the people of Russia squeal in pain. So why is that a great thing? And why isn't that a war crime? If we're going to talk about war crimes,
targeting civilians for violence to affect political change historically had been the exact definition of terrorism. But Robert, let's just take the madness one step further. Let me just bring this up. Canadian delicacy or Russian president? People confuse Putin with Putin. I hope this is the right article. A restaurant in France is attempting to clear its name after some confusion over one of its French-Canadian menu items. Maison de la Poutine has come under fire as its signature dish, fries, gravy, and cheese curds. It's delicious. Shares the name as a Russian President Vladimir Putin. So there was let's see here. Our dish was born in Quebec, yada yada yada. There were people taking flack for this. The House of Poutine has worked since its first day to perpetuate these values, and today brings its most sincere support to the. We're living through idiocracy, people, where restaurants are having to defend their menu items.
Well, there were restaurants and places in both Canada and in DC that were vandalized this past week.
Yep.
I mean, it's amazing how, Hollywood was given a cue to this. It gives you an idea for the broadness and depth of this agenda. Hollywood has made Russians their primary, the bad guy in almost every film. Even Equalizer. I love Equalizer. Love the show even more. It's Ruskies are the bad guys, right? They were the permissible bad guy. After 9/11, you could have shows like 24, terrorists were the bad guy, but then that became politically incorrect, and it shifted to almost all of them. The default bad guys are Russian. So Americans have been inundated slowly and steadily. It isn't just wokeism they've been trying to shove down your throat. It's certain prejudices against certain people based on national origin, which does violate at least U.S. law. You can't discriminate against someone, but it appears like that's what they've done to Abramovich in the UK, that there was no factual finding. Where's the jury trial? Where's this that they were talking about in whacking Hungary and Poland, going on and on and on, this EU court about the importance of due process, the importance of trials, the importance of protecting freedoms, freedom of movement, freedom of travel, freedom of property, due process before your property can be taken, a jury trial, so on. Where has that happened anywhere in the world? But you see all these people gleeful at their property being seized. And it's not just oligarchs that are having this happen to them. It's a range of people. But be careful. They start out with the oligarchs, just like the commies did in Russia. But sooner or later, they come for you like they did the peasants who ended up suffering the victims of that famine, not only in eastern Ukraine, but across the Caucasus and Kazakhstan.
You need to explain that right after you explain the actual definition of oligarch. I know what oligarch means, but when they go into they're seizing oligarchs. What is the role? What connection and practical role does Abramovich play in the Russian government, other than being a billionaire? And that's about all I know. He's an oligarch. What role does he have in Russian policy, Russian government, and then get to exactly seizing the assets of the peasants for redistribution?
Many of these people don't really fit the definition of oligarch because that suggests governmental power. Monarch, oligarch, just multiple people. But the label's been used to apply to any rich person that comes from certain parts of the world, conveniently. Like American oligarchs, George Soros, Bill Gates. These oligarchs have a lot more power in the world than Abramovich did, whose main obsession between his latest girlfriend was the Chelsea club more than almost anything, and getting a bigger yacht. Now how he earned his wealth, he did it mostly with the help of the West. He was an ally of the West in the 90s. In my view, he stole a lot of his wealth. But he would put it otherwise. But he's managed the deal Putin cut with all of them was keep your head low, stay out of politics, pay some tax, quit stealing, and we won't claw back what you've already stolen. And Abramovich was one of those who played ball with that. But he's not been very active in Russian politics at all. And so for him to be targeted is really striking. But they start there because, like the Soviets, they're not going to start with Joe Schmo down the street. They're not going to start with the Cossacks. They're not going to start with the peasant farmers. They're going to start with the people with the big, fancy, beautiful homes, and they're going to go in and break those homes up and give it to the people. But sooner or later, they come for you because it's the bureaucratic clerical class that wants all the power. And that's why we should not celebrate any deprivation of due process, any violation of property rights, any violation of liberty rights, just because they happen to be they start with politically disliked individuals. That's who I represent probably more than anyone, are people that for whatever reason are politically disliked by the power brokers in the world at the time or in the environment I'm in. But they start with them and then they go to you. Just like when they went after Alex Jones, there was a lot of people that said very little about it, including people on the right, including people on the left. And now of course, what they did is they use it as a template to come after everyone else next. They're starting with Russian oligarchs today. It's going to be ordinary people tomorrow, as Trudeau showed in the Canadian trucker convoy.
Or ordinary people with enough money to make it worthwhile, or enough wheat, or enough natural resources that the state requires, and they just say, well, it's ours now, and too bad, so sad.
Yep.
All right. First of all, Robert, I brought up a lot of chats of people who just, you're fire. It's magnificent, and it's a dose of reality, and it's a dose of truth, whether or not you like hearing it. But we should all like hearing the truth in as much as it's useful.